Hello and welcome to another Hollywood Wargaming episode for Bolt Action. I know it's been a while, guys. I've been doing a lot of Star Wars Legion stuff because there's been a lot of new releases for that game, and it's pretty fun to be on top of a new game that is pretty much still in its infancy stage. But my passion for Bolt Action is still unyielding, and I do feel like it is a game that lacks somewhat of an online media footprint. So in spirit of my Band of Brothers How to Build Starter Set video, I'm going to go ahead and begin a new series on how to build infantry squads for various factions when getting started in Bolt Action. It's a question I see time and time again come up on the Bolt Action subreddit, and I think it's a topic that deserves attention to help get new people into the hobby. Because regardless of how you choose to enter the hobby, it is going to revolve around building infantry models, and many players will start by buying that 30-man infantry box set. And to kick off this mini-series, we're going to be starting with the British faction. Not just because it's one that I am very familiar with, but because this faction's build options are pretty rudimentary and exist as a sort of baseline that applies to most factions in Bolt Action. Now, right off the bat, with most plastic infantry box sets that you will buy from Warlord, you will usually be getting 5 sprues that contain 6 infantry models each, which makes for a total of 30 infantry models. And these sprues usually contain the necessary amounts of equipment and weaponry to accurately equip your units on the tabletop. And in the game of Bolt Action, with such rudimentary weapon profiles across all armies, it's pretty easy to keep all models WYSIWYG in your army. WYSIWYG, of course, meaning what you see is what you get, aka the weapon on this model is the weapon he has for the rules. And right off the bat, before getting into this, the big exception with what you see is what you get for these models is with the anti-tank grenades. Whether you want to equip them with anti-tank grenades or not, for most factions, it really doesn't matter what you put on them. The only faction I know that for certain has anti-tank grenades modeled onto them is the Russians with their Molotovs, and a gray area for WYSIWYG is going to be with the Germans and their Panzerfaust. But for the most part, do not worry about the anti-tank grenades and having them modeled into the army. If you want a guy throwing a grenade in your squad, go ahead and model that on there. It's no big deal if they have anti-tank grenades or not. But for this video, we will break this down into 2 simple categories. Do you plan on buying support groups or not? So for our first scenario, if you do plan on picking up a support unit kit, such as an officer and his retinue, or a specialist weapon team that might include a Piat or Boys anti-tank rifle, those extra kits are going to cover your bases when it comes to making a command squad and some support teams you may want, and allow you to build your infantry squad as the bulk of your army with some more basic infantry equipment. And if you're willing to work with metal models and spend a little bit of extra money, it's not a bad idea. That will give you some more basic infantry models overall out of your plastic box sets, and allow you to be a little bit more flexible when building your lists. So if you did buy those extra support squads, we are basically going to take this box set that has 30 plastic models and build 3 rudimentary squads out of it. And in Bolt Action, the definition of a rudimentary squad is going to be an NCO with a submachine gun, followed by 8 riflemen, and 1 light machine gun. That will be a 10-man squad that has some extra shots at long range thanks to the LMG, and has a little bit of buff to lethality when you're in close range or melee with that NCO with his SMG. And if you're not familiar with World War II weaponry, for the British, the LMG is going to be that Bren gun, while that SMG, aka submachine gun, is either going to be a Thompson or a Sten gun. And if you build all 3 of your squads like this, you are not going to have a problem fielding them in Bolt Action. A regular infantry squad with this build absolutely will hold its weight on the battlefield and makes up the bulk of most lists you see appear on the tabletop. And while the British in Bolt Action do have more colorful units, like the Gurkhas or the Chindits, for the most part, they are going to be sporting the same equipment options. So this basic build is pretty much going to apply across the board. And if you are a non-British player or looking to begin playing Bolt Action as a non-British faction, I would say the US is the big outliner on that statement, but other than that, even if you're playing as Germans who have access to assault rifles, equipping a unit like this isn't a bad move. But let's say you went the same route that I did, and rather than buying command squads in metal blister packs, you wanted an all-plastic infantry force, and you want to use the existing bits in that plastic sprue to build your command officer and some special weapons. Well, this is also a viable approach, And fortunately, Warlord Games does include the bits on these sprues to do just that. And honestly, if you are a new player who's looking to get into the game with just one of these infantry boxes, you will want some variety to it, and you will need a commander to build a legal reinforced platoon. So this is likely a route that many players will take. And if you wish to do that, you are still going to be building 2 of those regular squads, again with your NCO sporting a submachine gun, followed by 1 LMG, and then 8 riflemen. And I suppose it is worth noting that one of those riflemen will become the loader for the LMG, and this could be represented as simple as someone carrying an ammo box, or just simply taking a knee. And those 2 infantry squads will make up the core of your reinforced platoon, as you do need 2 units for that infantry slot, and with this equipment loadout, they can serve as either regular or veteran units. I will also make special mention here that if you do plan on going early war British, they will not be taking any submachine guns. But we're talking like Invasion of France early right there, and that's pretty rare to see pop up. And for most players, I would definitely recommend building that NCO with a submachine gun. And that will be leaving us with 10 extra infantry models, one of which we will be turning into our commanding officer. This is of course your HQ unit for the reinforced platoon, who can be fielded alone or with 2 cronies alongside him, all 3 of which can choose weapons of their choice with no extra upgrade, that being rifle or SMG, or a pistol for the officer himself. But if you're really looking to be competitive here, you're going to be giving all 3 of these guys submachine guns. It's a 9-point upgrade that's greatly going to increase the firepower of such a small unit and allow them to compete more heavily in melee combat. And while it is very tempting to model your British officer waving his revolver around into the air and blowing into that whistle to signal a bayonet charge, you will almost always be taking advantage of those upgrade options and giving the whole squad an SMG. So I do recommend building all 3 of these guys with the same weapon. And for the most part, that weapon I would recommend is going to be a submachine gun. However, I will make note that there's many games where I have an officer with a pistol in hand, accompanied by 2 men with submachine guns, and my opponent has no problem when I say that the whole squad just has submachine guns, so if you're really hell-bent on that revolver-wielding officer, go ahead and do it. However, regardless of what you equip him with, your officer is going to have that peaked cap that comes on most sprues. And I highly recommend you save those peaked caps for your officers rather than just throwing it on your NCOs. It really does help them stand out from the rest of your army and make him look more important. But hey, let me tell you something, as a veteran bolt action player, I do not always take 2 cronies alongside my main officer. Many times I will take just 1 crony alongside him, that way I can confer the small team bonus when receiving enemy fire. That being said, that 3rd model that does get sculpted in the mold of my command squad does often see service in other units, as many lists that you try and build will be in need of extra submachine guns or riflemen. So whether they are given rifles or SMGs to match your commanding officer or not, and whether they actually be fielded with your commanding officer or not, doesn't really matter that much, but having them modeled after your commanding officer is a great tool to have in your arsenal. So we are now done sculpting 23 out of the 30 models, and we will look at your next 2 bodies to use. And right off the bat, I'm going to say these are probably going to be prone bodies or kneeling bodies, because this is going to be your special weapons team. One that usually takes form of an anti-tank weapon. For early and mid-war British, that is going to be the Boys anti-tank rifle, and for late war British, that is going to be the Piat anti-tank launcher. And look, neither of these weapons are particularly competitive, but they are great to have in your arsenal if you plan on playing thematic games, and both do add a lot of spice to your collection. That being said, neither should be dismissed wholesale, as they both can be incredibly useful if used properly. And obviously, one of these 2 models will be sculpted with the special weapon itself, being the Boys anti-tank rifle or the Piat, while one other takes the form of a loader or spotter. And much like the loaders for the LMGs, these guys can be as simple as rifleman taking a knee, or they can be modeled with ammo cases or binoculars. And the beauty of building these loaders is that you can almost always just field them as regular riflemen, or substitute them as LMG loaders if your list requires it. So there's a bit of flexibility there. And that brings us up to 25 out of the 30 models built, so what should we do with those last 5 infantrymen? Well, you have a couple options here, and it's really going to come down to what your preference is. If you honestly have no idea what you want to do with them, or you know you want to field a lot of infantry, go ahead and just make 5 more riflemen, and it will come in play some point or another. As everyone will tell you, Bolt Action is an infantry-based game, and having more riflemen is really going to help you buff out that infantry over the span of your collection. However, if you know you like running expensive elite units, you could maybe consider building a few or all 5 of these guys with some machine guns. And that is something that would come in handy with late war veteran or special forces units like commandos or SAS, as they can often take more submachine guns. Alternatively, you could build some extra LMGs here, which could serve either as an independent MMG squad, or work when you choose to take your infantry squads as veterans and field them with 2 LMGs per squad. And you really could mix here, but I would say either focus on the LMGs or the SMGs if you don't want to do just rifles, as LMGs and SMGs play 2 very different roles, one being close combat and the other being long ranged, and for the most part, both mesh better with rifles than they do with one another. But let's say you're going with a British Commonwealth or 8th Army sprue, you are also going to have that light mortar team, and building 2 of those guys with a light mortar option is also an option here, but it's definitely a thematic build as the light mortars aren't very competitive in Bolt Action whatsoever, and if you're playing late war, it might not really make sense to have those, unless you're doing paratroopers. So really, you can get pretty creative with those last 5 guys, but I would recommend building either LMGs, riflemen, SMGs, a mixture of the 3, and maybe throwing a light mortar in there if you do plan on playing that Desert Rats or paratrooper army. But that will wrap up our infantry box build when you want to build the HQ and support teams from it. And like I said throughout this video, the British are probably the most simple when it comes to kitting out infantry, and I have to say it does get pretty dull at times, but it is a pretty rudimentary standpoint that applies to most armies throughout Bolt Action, and if you just got a new infantry box, regardless of your faction, building it in either of these ways would not be a waste of your models, they would all come in handy down the road. That being said, if you are US or German, I would stick around for when those videos drop. There are going to be some alternate recommendations to it. Definitely more so with the US than German. But again, stick around. Go ahead, consider subscribing, turning on notifications so you can see when those videos do come out. And if you like this video, go ahead and leave a like. And for all the Bolt Action players out there, thanks for being patient. Know that I have not forgotten about this game system. I still have plenty of World War II stuff on my tabletop waiting to be painted. And I do have big plans for this channel in the future regarding Bolt Action. So stick around, and until next time guys, take care.